I miss Commissioner Shad being down there.
Chitlins. Where do you get chitlins at? You can go to you can save up and buy them, right? Yeah, but you can't get them. You can't buy them. I mean, you can't like buy cooked chitlins anywhere, can you?
Is everybody ready on the? At this time, I would like to call to order the Tuesday, April 26th City Commission meeting. It's now 6 p.m. If we could begin with the invocation, and you would please stand. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to lead us in prayer today, and I would like to dedicate this prayer to the passing of our dear friend and business owner, Julius Doc Smith, that we lost this past week, and his services will be this week. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together today, and I ask that you give us wisdom and discernment and a spirit of congeniality and cordiality as we discuss the business of the city, and all of us discuss what is the best for the quality of life and safety and well-being of all of us who live here. We ask that you welcome home your servant and our good friend, Julius Doc Smith. He was a friend to all of us and a valuable asset to the Lynn Haven business community, and he will be missed. Lord, just bring us all together now as we make these decisions together, and we ask all these things in your precious and holy name. Amen. Would you please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Item number 3 is the mayor's report, and it's been a busy couple of weeks. We've had the grand opening of the new and expanded gun depot on Highway 77. Wanted to wish them well and got to enjoy that wonderful day. We also had an employees luncheon, and I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of city employees I haven't had the pleasure to meet before, and enjoyed that very much, and just wanted to say what a great job that the Leisure Services Department did in bringing about that luncheon, and all the others who worked to make it a really great time for everyone. On April 22nd, I was able to participate, as many of the city employees were, with Lynn Haven Elementary School's Earth Day celebration. It had to come inside the gymnasium because of the rain, but it was wonderful to see how many members from the city came out to support the Lynn Haven Elementary students, and they did a great job. Also, 2 days were spent in negotiations and discussion with the Air Force and the Blue Water Development Company, the city, and other parties. Jerry Smithwick, who's a longtime friend of the city and attends many of the city commission meetings and has been part of that fuel depot charge for a long time, was present, and great strides were made, and moves toward the closing of that property becoming part of Lynn Haven are getting even closer, and one of our developers, Don Jackson, is with us today as well. And then, as I mentioned before, I was just saddened, as I know you were, at the passing of Doc Smith, and he'll be so missed in this community. And my understanding is his services are going to be this coming Saturday at St. Andrew's Baptist Church, but I don't think those are finalized yet. And then I wanted to commend our Public Works Department for the work they're doing with the community service workers from our county jail that the sheriff has put on loan to us, and has graciously brought help to the city because, as you know, hurricane season is getting closer, and we have a lot of kind of hot spots for drainage in the city, and they're working diligently on the weekends, and so are our city workers. It's a huge amount of work for the city workers to undertake, and just the places that I've noticed that have been worked on in the last couple of weeks, they really look great, and just wanted to commend Bobby Baker and everyone who's working with you to make that happen, because during Hurricane Opal, when we had the terrible flooding back in 1995, my home, every part of it flooded except the porch was covered, and the water was literally this far from the threshold of the door. So sometimes that half inch or that inch can make the difference in somebody's home being flooded. And so when you think that that little bit of mitigation doesn't make a difference, it does. So I just want to thank you so much for working toward that. And that's all I have. I did not ask that we have a vote to excuse Commissioner Shad. We need to do that. I do apologize that I forgot to do that again. We did it during the CRA meeting. So if I could have a motion from the board that we excuse Commissioner Shad from this meeting based on a family medical emergency, please.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. And a vote, please, Mr. Schubert.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Ashbrook, did you have a report today?
I have no report.
Commissioner Barnes?
I have no report.
Commissioner Friend?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just also want to echo the grand opening or the re-grand opening of the gun depot. It's good to see businesses expanding in Lynn Haven. They do a great job down there and did a really good grand opening as well, and also have TPO meeting tomorrow. I really hate that I missed, I was traveling for the Arbor Day and the employee luncheon, but those are two of my favorite things to do, so I hate that I missed that. But TPO meeting tomorrow, if anybody has any questions or comments, concerned, I'm available. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 5 is the city manager's report.
I've only got one item, and that is I would like to petition the commission to table item 9 and 14 concerning the voluntary de-annexation. I've had conversations with the developer and also the county, and I'd like to put that on hold until further discussion.
And items 9 and 14.
9 and 14.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? Would you please call the roll? Thank you.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend? Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, and the motion is passed. Okay, item number 6, was that all you had?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 6, the city attorney's report.
Yes, ma'am. I just have one thing. I've been working with the city staff to facilitate the transfer of the McMullen Library to the property that it's moving to. And the land that it's moving to is owned by the Lynn Haven Garden Club from a grant from the city from 1951. And looking at that deed, the deed had included a reversionary clause where if they couldn't sell or convey the property to anyone else, and if they tried to, it would revert to the city. So my recommendation would be that the city release that condition and that we record the deed and the mayor be allowed to sign whatever documents necessary to memorialize that so we can get the library transferred to the location it's going to.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Is that something, Mr. Jackson, that you'll bring back to us, or you can do with a motion and approval now?
No, this would be authorization for
Okay.
me to prepare the documents and for the mayor to sign the documents to facilitate that transfer.
I'll second the motion.
This would allow us to directly transfer, I believe, the actual land from, and not involve the city. Basically, there's a reverter in there, and it just waives our right.
Exactly. It just
Right.
waives right to revert. There's a reverter.
We're not in the chain of title.
Yeah, a 60-year-old reverter that says that it comes back to the city under certain conditions. And all I'm recommending is rather than the city take the property back and then transfer it to the Historical Society, that the Garden Club be allowed to do that. And the only way they can do that is if we release that right, and then they'll be able to transfer that property.
Okay.
We've had a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the board or further questions about the property transfer? Are there any questions or discussion from the public about the property transfer for the McMullen Library that's the property from the Garden Club to the Heritage Society? And there appears to be none. Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. And that motion is approved, and thank you
That's
so
all I have,
much.
Mayor.
Yes, thank you so much for that work on that matter. Item number 7 is a public hearing, and it is now 6:08, and this public hearing is open. This public hearing will be amending Section 5-03-00 of the ULDC, exempt signs, Ordinance 1015, and Amanda Richard, our city planner, I believe, has a report for us. Thank you.
This is the final reading of an ordinance which would make changes to our existing sign ordinance. The planning department had received a number of requests from business owners that they be allowed to have temporary signs outside their businesses without having to apply for a permanent sign permit. And these types of signs are not currently permitted within the city. So the planning department was tasked with preparing some changes, and we worked with the attorney to put some recommended changes within the code. The following changes shall be that optional signs at businesses will be allowed. Businesses aren't required to have them, obviously, they are optional, but they shall be limited to one per business during operating hours, so they would have to bring them in at close of business. They shall be freestanding and located within 4 feet from the main business entrance. They shall not be located in the right-of-way or impede pedestrian traffic. They shall be of sturdy construction and not a card and wire snipe sign, what they call the snipe signs, you know, the ones that we're constantly picking up along the roadway. They shall contain no mechanical moving parts and no flashing lights, and shall have maximum dimensions of 25 inches wide, 48 inches tall, and 25 inches deep.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussions from the board on these on this particular amendment? Any questions or discussion from the public? Mr. DeFell?
Excuse me. Virgil DeFell, 1009 Colorado Avenue, Lynn Haven, Florida. One of our new business owners spoke to me a few months ago. He did own a different franchise for many years here in Lynn Haven. And he had a problem, he thought, according to code enforcement. And I said to him, have you spoken to Mr. Schubert? He said, no. So I happened to see that individual just a few days ago. He was a much happier camper because not only did Mr. Schubert and he talk, apparently, I don't really know this, Mr. Schubert, but you must have made a visit, and the business is in compliance with these regulations, I presume. So I just want to make a kind of recommendation, not wrong word, recognition, Mr. Schubert, your response to that. It's not an old new business. It's been around there lots of years, but without identifying it. But so your response from where I'm standing was very appropriate, and I want to recognize that.
Thank you, Mr. DeFell. Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, at this time it is 6:12, and that public hearing is closed. Item number 8 is another public hearing, and the opening time is 6:12, amending section 4.05.00 of the ULDC T&D Design Standards Ordinance 1016. Ms. Richards, if you'd like to.
This is another proposed amendment to the Unified Land Development Code, but this section is the TND, the Traditional Neighborhood Development section, as it pertains to design standards. I wanted to bring to your attention that no impact on the comprehensive plan will arise because of this. This isn't changing anything within the comprehensive plan, which dictates allowable uses and densities and intensities. Those elements are not being altered at all. The proposed amendments are design criteria which are peculiar to a TND. The changes to the code will be the following if you agree to these. The requirement for rear alleys will be removed. We will obviously, when we're looking at site plans, make sure that there is adequate room on the lot for the parking that will be required, but they will no longer be required to have rear alleys. The requirement that front-facing garages be set back at least 4 feet from the front lateral of the house You had all given approval for this in phase 1 previously, but the developer would like to see this for the entirety of the development. Restrictions on cul-de-sacs will be removed. The requirement for on-street parking will be removed. That's not to say there won't be any on-street parking, but the requirement will be removed. Light spacing will change from a maximum distance of 75 feet to 400 feet. And also, there will be lighting at intersections. We didn't add that, but we're going to amend the ordinance to say that it will be every 400 feet, but also required at intersections. And those are the changes.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion from the board on item number 8? Any questions or discussion from the public? Item number 8. Thank you. At this time, this public hearing is closed at 6:15. We've tabled item number 9, moving to item number 10, which is the consent agenda. Item number 10, minutes for the 4/12/16 regular meeting, and item number 11, the approval to submit a fiscal year 2016 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant application. Is there a motion to accept the items under the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Thank you. There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or questions from the board on either items 10 or 11? Any questions or discussion from the public on either of these items? There appears to be none. Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, and so both of these items are approved. Moving on to old business, item number 12 is the second and final reading of Ordinance 1015, amending Section 50300 of the ULDC, exempt signs. Will you be reading that ordinance or?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Find it.
1015.
Right here.
An ordinance, ordinance number 1015, an ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven, Florida, amending sections 5.03.00, signs of the Lynn Haven Unified Land Development Code as it relates to exempt signs, repealing all
Motion for
ordinances in
action on the
conflict,
second final
and
reading.
providing for an immediately effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion for acceptance of this ordinance?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Any discussion or questions from the public? Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, and the motion has carried. Item number 13, moving along at warp speed, as they say in Star Trek. Second and final reading of Ordinance 1016, amending Section 4.05.00 of the ULDC, the T&D Design Standards.
Ordinance number 1016, an ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven, Florida, amending Section 4.05.00 of the Lynn Haven Unified Land Development Code as it relates to standards for traditional neighborhood development, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing for an immediately effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion for acceptance?
Move approval.
And a second.
I would second with the understanding from the Commissioner's motion that it be subject to the wording of the verbiage that regardless of the spacing of the streetlights, that they will address a streetlight at each and every intersection.
So will Commissioner Barnes need to
I'll amend
restate
my
his
motion
motion?
to reflect
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And so the motion has been reflecting the placement of the streetlights, and it's been seconded. Are there any questions or concerns? Any questions or concerns from the public?
Just so I understand the motion, Commissioner Ashbrook, it's to, in the section about, let me just make sure,
Streetlight spacing?
streetlight spacing, that a streetlight be addressed in every intersection.
Regardless of the 400-foot rule.
Okay.
Okay, there was a question from the public? Yes.
My name is Brad Yunt, 210 Lakeview Terrace. My concern is that with these changes, it seems that we're moving closer and closer to becoming a town like Parker, or Cedar Grove, or Springfield, or Callaway. We're not retaining the flavor of Lynn Haven. And they want to put in a traditional subdivision, then move the houses further apart and put in a traditional subdivision. They got the benefit of a closer spacing so they can sell more lots, and then they keep nibbling away and taking all the features that make TND desirable, and they say, no, we can't afford that. We can't sell that. Well, if they can't sell that, spread the lots apart and build a regular subdivision.
Thank you. Any comments from anyone? Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll on item number 13?
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, and the motion has passed. Item number 14 has been tabled.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, did we actually table it? I know he asked for us to table it, but I don't recall, did we actually make
Yes,
a motion?
we
Okay,
did.
I just missed it. Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem.
Voted for it.
Did I? Can we double check the record? Okay, I just don't remember it.
Okay. Items number 15, the second and final reading of Ordinance 1018, General Employees Retirement System. Mr. Schubert, are you ready?
Yes,
Almost.
I guess item
1018.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's describe it. Ordinance number 1018, an ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven amending Part 2, Chapter 50, Personnel, Article 5, General Employees Retirement System of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven, amending Section 50-166, definitions by amending the definitions of actuarial equivalent, credited service, and spouse, amending Section 50-171, benefit amounts and eligibility, amending Section 50-173, disability, amending Section 50-175, optional forms of benefits, amending Section 50-179, maximum pension, amending Section 50-188, prior government service, amending Section 50-190, deferred retirement option plan, amending Section 50-192, reemployment after retirement, providing for codification, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept Ordinance 1018?
So moved.
And a second. Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Any questions from the board regarding the Employees Retirement System ordinance? Any questions from the public? Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Virgil DeFell, 1009 Colorado. I just put my new batteries in my hearing aids, Mayor, and I think I still missed it. I'm backing up to 14. Was that taken off on their old business, the de-annexation?
Yes, Mr. DeFell, at the beginning of the meeting, the city manager requested that we table items 9 and 14 because of some issues with those that he needs to resolve before we bring them up. So we tabled them both at the same time.
And was that what Commissioner Friend was calling attention to?
Yes.
And that did not need an opportunity for public commentary, then I assume?
Well, I did ask for public commentary if there was any objection.
Now I just did it.
Okay.
I really wanted to know if that was a voluntary removal from the agenda or not.
It's just tabled until the information is gotten that Mr. Schubert needs.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Okay, now I'm back to the second and final reading of Ordinance 1018. We've had a motion and a second. I've asked for questions from the board, and then I was asking for questions from the public. Are there any others? Okay, at this time, Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll for item number 15, the second and final reading of Ordinance 1018?
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Anderson?
Aye, and that motion has carried. Moving on to item number 16. These next two are very similar. If you need some help with reading, you've read quite a bit. Second and final reading of Ordinance 1019, the Firefighters Retirement System. Thank you.
Ordinance number 1019, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven amending Chapter 50, Personnel, Article 4, Firefighters Retirement System of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lynn Haven, amending Section 50-121, definitions by amending the definitions of actuarial equivalent, credited service, firefighter, and spouse, amending Section 50-126, benefit amounts and eligibility, amending Section 50-128, disability, amending Section 50-130, optional forms of benefits, amending Section 50-135, maximum pension, amending Section 50-144, prior fire service, amending Section 50-147, deferred retirement optional plan, adding new Section 50-149, supplemental benefit component for special benefits, Chapter 175, share accounts, providing for severability of provisions, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Do I have a motion and a second for acceptance of item number 16?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes, and that motion has carried. If you came for an exciting commission meeting tonight, it doesn't seem to be happening. Item number 17, which is our second and final reading of Ordinance 1020, Police Officers Retirement System. I'm sorry, I was just joking, but they are very important ordinances.
Ordinance number 1020, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance of the City of Lynn Haven amending Chapter 50, Personnel, Article 3, Police Officers Retirement System of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lynn Haven, amending Sections 50-76, definitions by amending the definitions of actuarial equivalent, credited service, and spouse, amending Section 50-81, benefit amounts and eligibility, amending Section 50-83, disability, amending Section 50-85, optional forms of benefits, amending Section 50-90, maximum pension, amending Section 50-99, prior police service, amending Section 50-101, deferred retirement option plan, adding new Section 50-104, supplemental benefit component for special benefits, Chapter 185, share accounts, providing for severability of provisions, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion and second for acceptance of item number 17?
So moved.
Second.
Is there thank you. Is there any discussion from the board? And there appears to be none. Any discussion from the public? Mr. DeFell?
Mayor Virgil DeFell, 1009 College. We may have established a record for length of meetings at the 6 o'clock meeting. I'm not sure if that was last month or the previous month, but I do remember it was 92 minutes long. So hopefully we won't be making an effort to exceed that record today.
Well, I try to keep the meeting succinct, Mr. DeFell, but I also want to give everyone an opportunity to be heard. So we're moving along as quickly as we can.
Believe me.
Okay, thank you.
And you have to make a decision. You have some discretion whether you adhere to the time limit or not. I understood that. And that was I don't want to mention it was about the schoolhouse last time.
Okay.
Now, I'm here to talk about our retirement system for our police officers. And I didn't comment on the fire department, but I would say the same thing. I live here by choice for over 25 years in Lynn Haven. When I go to the bank after hours and maybe use the ATM machine, I don't stand up and look around and be sure nobody's close by.
And Mr. DeFell, I don't mean to, we just about the time, but if you don't mind, I would love for you to commend the police officers, but if you could save it until the end at the public commentary, because this commentary is supposed to be only on this ordinance at this time. Is that
No, I had
okay
it
with you?
written that way,
and I'll recognize you
but
again at the
I got
end.
in 2 shots for Chief David Messer.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions about the ordinance itself? Okay, there are none. Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ashbrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes, and so the ordinance has passed. Okay, moving on to new business. Item number 18 is discussion and possible action regarding the impact fee analysis with a presentation by Burton and Associates. Does the city manager or staff have comments about this?
Yes, we have representatives from Burton and Associates that are here to make a 30 to 45-minute presentation. You can see it on the screens. We will also make this available on the internet no later than tomorrow. But Burton is the firm that we hired to study the impact fees for Lynn Haven. I've been here 2 years, and I've had a steady diet from contractors and developers as well as owners of property looking to develop, telling me that our commercial rates are high. And when you do a simple comparison to the county and other competing cities at a per unit value, you can see that in some of our commercial uses, we are double some of the other cities. So we're not necessarily a viable option when it comes to commercial development for some types of uses, which may be good in some cases, maybe not. Personally, I believe Lynn Haven's the best city in Bay County, and I don't mind being at the top. I do, however, mind being double the second highest. So what we asked Burton to do, and typically they do that every 5 years in counties and cities. It's been 10 years since they did a study in Lynn Haven. So we've asked them to take a look at our impact fees. And I might add, in 2006, the last time they did a study was the run-up. And those numbers, the capital improvement plan 10 years ago, didn't affect the bubble bursting. So they're here to present their findings. Staff's recommendation is to adopt the findings at 100% of cost recovery. They can speak some to how they derive their rates. You'll see the commercial rates overall generally decline. The residentials stay the same or move up some. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Burton. And also, the city attorney can speak to this, but as far as taking action, the way this process would move forward from here is if the commission wanted to adopt that, we'd have to do it by ordinance, which of course would mean 2 city commission meetings, and the actual rates, whatever were adopted, would have to be advertised for a minimum of 90 days before they came effective, which they're here today to present to the commission, and there's a lot of information, and if we need to have another meeting at a later date, we can. The timing will coincide with the end of our fiscal year when we usually address rates as well. So trying to get this in front of the commission so you all can see this. It's been 10 years since they've been here, so without any further ado.
Thank you, Joel.
Possible action.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I had the honor of being of service to this city for quite some time, and it's a pleasure to be back again. With me tonight is Eric Van Mulson, who's been your project manager. I'm going to give some introductory remarks and explanations about the impact fee study and about what impact fees are, basically, and then Eric will go through the presentation. This is about a 10-page presentation, so whether this lasts 30 or 45 minutes is more a function of your questions probably than our presentation. We'll probably be able to get through it in about 10 or 15 minutes at the most. There's a much more extensive presentation that we've left with the city manager that gives a lot more detail than I'm going to go into here about the methodology of calculating every single impact fee, and we're prepared to go into that with you today if you wanted to, but I think it's best to give you an overview and then drill down as deep as you would like to rather than going into all the details with you up front. So we want to give you a background. We're going to present the calculation of the fees, which is a summary of all impact fees. And then from there down, all the utility impact fees there, we're going to show you what they are and how it adds up for each of the different kinds of developments. And then we're going to give you our recommendations. Impact fees are charges that have to be paid at or before the time of building permit issue. They're designed to recover the cost of providing the capital facilities or services needed to serve new development. And it's all about capital, and it's all about growth. This is the fee that, at least conceptually, allows you to put in place something where growth can pay its way, and it's not burdening the existing residents with the facilities that are necessary to meet the demands of growth. It allows new development to pay its way. It minimizes to the extent to which existing residents bear that cost. If you don't have impact fees and you continue to grow, then the level of service, then you can't put in the facilities to deal with that growth, and the level of service to your existing population will degrade over time. So it does preserve that. There's substantial case law about impact fees in Florida, and the state has passed an impact fee legislation. It's in the statutes now also to some extent, and I'll go over that with you. But they must bear a reasonable relationship to the benefit received by those who pay for the fee. There has to be a rational nexus of the benefit and the burden of the fee. It cannot exceed growth's proportional share of the cost of new facilities or services. An example would be if you were to put in a new line. You had a water line that needed replacing, and you upsized that line. It was a 10-inch line, you made it a 14-inch line. You can pay for and include the cost of that additional upsizing because that's for growth, but you can't cover the cost of replacing the line with the impact fees. That has to be out of normal user fees and rates. So, but you can do that proportional sharing. You must include credits for contributions from development. A good example of that is a water and sewer system where you're funding a part of your fixed assets in your system with debt. And so when the new connection pays their impact fee, they then start paying user fees, which have some component of the same capital cost that are included in their impact fee. So in the impact fee, what we do is we calculate a net present value of the principal that they would pay in the debt over a period of time and deduct that as a credit against the impact fee. And a similar thing is done in the other impact fees. They must be earmarked and expended in such a way as to ensure that those paying the fee receive the benefit from that payment. You can't just take the impact fees and bundle them in with your general revenues. You have to earmark them, keep them separate, and you have to spend them for the reason that you enacted them, which would be for police facilities, new police facilities to meet the demand, new fire facilities. If you add policemen and you add police cars, those cars can be covered by this. If you simply are replacing cars because they wear out, those cars can't be covered by this. So it has to be earmarked and spent for those very things. And it must be based upon current localized cost data. The legislation passed at the state and is now in the statute does say that you can't just use industry standards. You can't do a survey of your neighbors and adopt what they did. You have to use your own capital cost data to develop these impact fees. And I will elaborate a little bit on what Joel mentioned to you about the timing. Whatever notices you have to do to enact your local ordinances is what you have to do. The state doesn't have any mandate about a special notice to enact your ordinance. But what the state does say is when you adopt the fees, in the ordinance or resolution that you use to adopt the fees, you have to make them effective at least 90 days from that date they're adopted. And that gives developers and new people who are doing new construction time to accommodate the fees in their plan. So if you adopted them in what are we now? We're at the end of April. If you adopted them sometime in May or early June, you could set the effective date to be like October 1, and you would meet that requirement, and you would be in good shape. So that's how that would all work.
In this case, just a comment on that, if these were approved, we'd have commercial developers waiting for that 90 days to lapse, just as a comment, because they actually go down.
What I'm going to do right now is I want to turn it over to Eric and let him present this. Some of this may be a little hard to see. We'll walk through it with you very, very clearly. And Eric, here, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. My name is Eric Finn-Malson. Once again, I was the project manager for the calculation of these impact fees. And I'm going to briefly run through your current fees, the types they are and how they're imposed, and then what the changes to each of these fees would be based off the current study. At the top are your two water and sewer utility impact fees. There's an impact fee for water service and sewer service. They're typically paid in as a combined basis, but there are some unique cases to where a developer would only have water or sewer service. Your current fee for water is based off of an ERU per meter size or an equivalent residential unit. It's essentially an equivalency to a 5/8 inch water meter, which is what a single family home typically uses. Your current water fee is $820 per ERU, and you have a sewer fee of $3,147 per ERU, for a total of $3,967 per ERU for combined water and sewer service. Your law enforcement and fire rescue impact fees are assessed to all properties, residential and non-residential. For your single-family residences, they are assessed on a per household basis. So for law enforcement, you have a $121 fee per household, and for fire rescue, a $216 fee per household. For multifamily structures, they are assessed on a per dwelling unit basis. This would apply to a duplex. They would have 2 of these fees, a triplex 3 of them. A 10-unit apartment complex would have 10 of these fees. For law enforcement, your multifamily dwelling rate unit is $203, and for law enforcement, or for fire rescue, it's $216. For non-residential properties, your current fees are imposed on a 1,000 square foot basis. Your current law enforcement fee for all non-residential properties is $2,033 for each 1,000 square feet, and for fire rescue, it's $345 per 1,000 square feet. You have impact fees for parks and recreation services and facilities, and these are only applied to your residential properties, as non-residential properties are not impacting your need for new parks and recreation services. And your current rate for a single-family household is $621, and per multifamily dwelling unit is $480. You have 2 other impact fees for transportation and stormwater that were not part of this study, so we are not recommending any changes to those for new calculations. This is the same table with your updated fees in the box there. I know it's a little hard to see, but I'll try to read them out for you. In general, your water fee will be going up a little bit from $820 to $1,151, a change of about $331 or 40%. And your sewer fee could go up from $3,147 to $3,232, approximately 2.7%. And the combined water and sewer fee would be going up approximately $416 per ERU, or approximately 10.5%. For your law enforcement fees, you'd see an increase of about $156 to your single-family residential per household charge, and you would see a decrease of approximately $110 to your multifamily per dwelling unit charge. You would also see a significant decrease in your non-residential law enforcement fee from $2,033 to $160 per 1,000 square foot, and that is the largest shift in the fee in the new study that we've created. Your fire rescue services would have a similar shift in costs, an increase of approximately $80 for your single-family residentials to $296, I believe that says. And for your multifamily per dwelling unit charge, whereas before it was equal to the single-family residential charge, it is now a decrease of $117 to $98.43 per dwelling unit. Your non-residential fire rescue fee would go down approximately $175 to $170 per 1,000 square feet, another decrease and shift for the non-residential properties. Your parks and recreation impact fees per household and per dwelling unit would be going down approximately 29% each, $182 decrease on the residential side down to $438 per household, and $141 decrease on your multifamily dwelling unit charge to $339.19. Now, what does this actually mean to your properties? We have a few examples of what a property would pay in total and impact fees and how all these shifts in costs mean to the actual property. This is the example of a single-family home, and you can see starting at the top is their water impact fee, and the color, according to the titles, matches the color at the graphs below. The water impact fee would go up slightly, and your sewer impact fee would go slightly more. And you can see in the stacked graphs that the sewer impact fee would be the largest fee a single-family home would pay. Your law enforcement, fire rescue would be going up some, and your parks and recreation would be going down, and the other 2 fees would not change. And the net effect on a single-family home would be a $470 increase, or approximately an 8% overall increase in total impact fees paid at the time of development. Oh, forgot we had those. For multifamily, we have a representative 150-unit apartment complex as your sample property. And you can see in most of the fees, with the exception of the water and sewer fees, which would go up slightly, they would be going down on a per dwelling unit basis and would represent an approximate 21.5 decrease to the overall burden to this apartment complex for 150 units, from $226,000 down to $178,000. For a non-residential property, you can see the big shift we already discussed in the law enforcement and fire rescue fee would cause a significant decrease to their overall impact fee burden at the time of development, from $136,000 down to $58,000, or a decrease of approximately 57% for a 40,000 square foot commercial building. And each of these fees, with the exception of your water and sewer fee and your stormwater fee, are imposed on a 1,000 square foot basis. So we picked a 40,000 square foot commercial building as your sample property. And you can see in the current fee that blue bar represents an $81,000 current law enforcement fee, and that would be what the new calculations do is effectively right-size that fee based off the current localized data, and it would go down from $81,000 to $6,400 for this non-residential property. So in summary, what does this mean? You can adopt these fees up to 100% cost recovery, and that's the level of fees we've presented to you today. If the Commission chose so, they can adopt them at or below 100% cost recovery, and all of your fees will be proportionately arranged at that percentage cost recovery. For implementation, we've already discussed this a little bit, but you would have to set your hearing dates for adoption, and the Florida Impact Fee Act requires the 90-day notification before the effective date of the ordinance resolution. We would also recommend, particularly for your utility impact fees, to consider an adoption of an annual fee index. This is typically done, for example, for your water and sewer utilities via the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, which would keep up the cost of your impact fees with inflation before you decided to recalculate the rates in the next 5 or so years. And of course, we would recommend that these fees get recalculated up to every 5 years as costs and your demographics change. And if you do index, we'd highly recommend you adjust them every 5 years so you don't begin to over-recover fees if you index them. With that, we'll open up with a discussion. We have a lot of extra data in terms of how the fees are calculated and the underlying assumptions with them that we can go over with you, but we wanted to keep it at more of a brief summary level to enable discussion and get into the weeds as we see fit with your questions.
Thank you so much for that informative presentation. Are there any questions from the board for Burton and Associates representatives?
The only thing I'd have, Mayor, is the extra data that you're talking about. Is that going to be made available to us instead of just asking you about it? Can it's something we can get a hold of? And
yes, sir. We have a more expanded presentation that has a lot of the nitty-gritty details behind it, and there are also reports detailing the full study, the legal requirements for the impact fees, and the full schedules of data that went into the calculations, and will be available to you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, actuarially, it's not something you provide us with. We have to discern from a budget standpoint how it's going to impact us, correct? As far as the fees, or if we adopt...
In terms of a potential revenue impact?
Yes.
We could assist with projecting that if there's a schedule of projected development, and we could assist with calculating what the difference between the current and new fees would be. That's something we can help you out with. It's not something we've currently have available, but...
So I guess we rely on our city manager and the budget process for that.
Sure. They have a very dynamic model that they can put up that's live. So, for example, I think Eric mentioned the fact that, if you adopted it, say, hypothetically 90%, you can't just do the residential at 90 and the commercial at 100, but you could see the impact of that by plugging in the different numbers. I think, is it Access? Yeah.
No, it's in Excel.
Is it Excel? Okay.
But you could also, these fees are going down, and you've said there's been a lot of input to you about the level of the fees. You may have some assumptions of growth that you have, that if you adopt these fees, maybe it would be more. Maybe you would have more commercial come in, so you could see with a lower fee but the higher growth, how does that shake out in terms of the revenue? So we could help you develop that little analysis too, if you'd like. So.
I had some concerns and maybe just some difficulty in understanding. It seemed to me that the ratio for the residential was a much less percentage change than it would have been for the commercial, and I would have concerns that it appears that the commercial will be getting a much better break in the impact fees than residential. So I would love to see some more data and information on that.
You'll have it all. There's a final report that has it all in it, and the presentation is kind of between the final report and this in terms of the detail. But basically, when we do these impact fees, the last thing we do is say, what was it before? We take the current data and we calculate the fees, and that's what they are. And then, you would have to go fee by fee to ascertain what's different from before. But these are, given the current methodology and the generally accepted rate-making practice in terms of doing these types of impact fees, this is the way they're done today. And we're in a different period than you were before. Back in 2006, we were right before the bubble. There was exponential growth occurring, and there was a lot of things in terms of capital numbers that were really never panned out. So some of those are different because of that. But yeah, all of that will be in there.
Thank you. Because the 57% difference was eye-opening. I was just wondering, that comparison with the residential looked really high. So I'll look forward to learning more about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there other questions or comments? From the public, any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Debbie Richland and 106 East 18th Street. I was just wondering why stormwater was excluded from your impact fee analysis.
I have to defer to the city. We had a scope of services, and it was a while back when it was done. I don't know if, Joel, you recall why it was excluded or not. But
Yeah, I mean, we have a nominal stormwater fee. That's something we could look at. I might add that we can look at that for the next presentation, but Burton has also traditionally been the company that looks at our rates as far as water, sewer, stormwater, et cetera, and perhaps we can address that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, question, sir?
Yeah, my name is Jeff Spears, 404 Kentucky Avenue. If I heard it several times, 2006 was the last time that analysis was done, and it's mandated by state law to do it every 5 years, or
Recommended. Recommended.
Recommended every.
Not by state law.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And then it was recommended. It was also acknowledged that it was done at the bubble. Everybody knew the bubble disappeared 5 years or so after that, but it was retained to keep those fees, as you said, double the average of the area. So why was that tabled for so long?
Well, I'd probably be the one to answer that. I wasn't here, but you could see at 100% recovery, the residential inches up some overall on a typical residence while commercial comes down. I've been here for 2 years, and like I said, I've had steady feedback, and that's why we're addressing it now.
Okay.
I can't tell you why it wasn't addressed in.
Well, one of the reasons was simply because of the recession, and we tried to keep things as low as we possibly could without having to burden the taxpayer during that period of time. We've now reached that point where we're having to make up the difference for that. So that's why we kept it low.
What is the anomaly that Lynn Haven has as a disadvantage that makes the fees higher than any other surrounding cities? Lynn Haven produces its own water. A lot of the other cities buy water from, I think, Panama City. So what is it, and Lynn Haven being very consolidated and very dense, what is the disadvantage that Lynn Haven has that puts them at such a higher rate?
Well, it really was more the other fees than the water. And we will have a survey in their study, and in the bigger presentation, there's a survey that compares you to surrounding cities. But it's hard to tell just if you look rate by rate, because some cities have 2 of them, but not 1. Some don't have parks and rec. Some, everybody doesn't have the same level of impact fees. But the water and sewer impact fees, I've kind of lost track of your question in my answer, actually. But the difference is really less in the water and sewer than it is in the others. And now you're going to be more right-sized. So if you did a survey of the ones you have now, you're, like the city manager said, you're highest. With these, you're going to be not the outlier like you are today. So that's going to fix that.
Okay. And thank you for your question.
So in conclusion, does that mean that we're going to be more right-sized based upon the analysis data, or more right-sized based upon the surrounding comparative cities?
Well, you're going to be more right-sized based upon the data in terms of what your fees should be today, and we believe you're going to be more comparable to your surrounding cities also, as will be reflected in the survey.
So as a general number, that still puts us what percentage higher than the average city?
I don't know right now. We'll have to look at the survey, and what we'll do, when Eric calculated those fees for the different types of residents, what we'll have to do is find your surrounding cities that have the same fees you do and calculate it for them and for you, and see how a single-family home compares in the other areas that have the same fees that you do. It's really hard to compare when a developer comes in and pays their impact fees, they're out of check. And if yours have impact fees that another city doesn't. Even if the ones you do have are the same as the other city, yours will look higher to them. So we need to be sure we sort that out and compare apples to apples for you and give you a good reading on where you stand to the other cities. And the way that might be relevant to you is to decide what percentage cost recovery that you want to do. Because if you are higher, you may be higher because other cities only chose to implement their impact fees at 75% recovery of cost or 50%. So because you're higher doesn't mean that you're more expensive in terms of your assets. It means that the board enacted fees that were less. So you could enact them at a lower level once you see that survey. If you're at the top and you wanted to be at the 75 quartile or whatever, you can do a percent cost recovery to get you there.
And I think something important to note too is the overall burden or the overall revenue. When you compare us to some of the cities in Bay County, while this 100% recovery puts us in line as far as the bar charts, they also have additional revenue sources such as an extra sales tax. So, I mean, you got to consider the whole thing. But are you talking about rates or are you talking about impact fees or both, Mr. Spears?
We're talking about the rates, the impact, the rate cost of the impact fee. Basically,
okay.
What is pushing it out of the boundaries of making Lynn Haven so much more expensive on impact fees based upon other cities comparatively?
Right, and I think as Mr. Burton said, so all this, we're not talking about rates for existing homes. This just impacts new construction.
Correct.
And you're a residential developer, I think. So,
but I think
as far as the residential side, I guess as Commissioner Barnes stated, we didn't readdress it, and probably if we did, it might have gone up if we continued with that bubble, but because it didn't, you had this happen since then, so we're right about where we were back in '06. So that's why you're just seeing the residential inch up. This is all based on our capital improvement plan, which is probably substantially different than it was in 2006 as well. So, 100% of where we're at now is substantially different than in 2006 when the projections for growth were still on that huge positive slope. So now we've more leveled off to a 3 to 5%, so that 100% doesn't allow you the ceiling that it might have in 2006.
And I think the discussion about you being a very high compared to your neighbors is with the fees now. And when you adopt the new fees,
right,
that condition will be corrected. You may still be high in the survey, but you won't be the highest one by the margin that you are now. And then if you choose to do a lesser cost recovery, it would bring you down in the survey to an area that you wanted to be if you wanted to do that. You do have discretion over that. You don't really have discretion over going higher, though, but you can go lower.
But I think your point, we got to remain cognizant that this pays for new development. It's for new impacts on the system, and the city has a considerable capital improvement plan to address 89-year-old water and sewer mains that we need to make sure that we're sound fiscally as well.
That's true.
Well, from what I understand, he said that you actually can't recover those costs inside of the impact fees to replace the lines.
Correct. My point is that we can't use current user fees. They're already pretty much spoken for with our debt and our capital improvement plan. This needs, at least in my estimation as a city manager, this needs to cover all the new growth because I don't have a lot of flexibility in the enterprise fund because we've got to replace 70, 80-year-old mains in the ground and build roads, et cetera.
Now, to the extent you have to expand your plant capacity, that can be covered by this. To the extent that you issue debt to do even of your some of your renewal or replacement projects, or whatever you do to issue the debt for, you can have an engineering analysis done of the projects that are funded by the debt to determine how much of it was to replace existing capacity and how much of it was for new capacity. And let's just hypothetically say you issued a bond issue and 60% of it was to replace existing issues, and 40% was to upsize pipes, add new treatment capacity or whatever, then you can use your impact fee dollars to pay for that expansion portion of that debt service. You have to develop rates, though, that recover 100% of the debt service. What that does, though, when you use the impact fee dollars, it frees up those user fee rate dollars to go over to your capital improvement program and pay for renewal and replacement dollar for dollar. You can't do that with the impact fees. But you can kind of move the money around by paying. Because when you issue that bond issue that has 40% of excess capacity in it, Your current ratepayers every month are writing checks for the benefit of the people that are coming in the future. You're holding 40% of excess capacity because you can't go down to Home Depot and buy one ERC of water and sewer capacity. You got to put in economic quantities. So you're holding that for the people that come. So it's only right that they pay their fair share and come back and pay some of that debt service to give you a more flexible use of your user fees to pay for your renewal and placement.
And to just piggyback off that, that's the exact philosophy that the commission has taken over the past 15 plus years, is that any new growth that comes into the city should pay for itself. It should not be a burden to everyone.
Yes, sir. And it's hard to get it to pay for itself because of what you have to do. You got to put in the plant now, and you got to pay for it now. So you have to use these types of cash flow mechanisms to get that to happen more efficiently.
Exactly.
Thank you for that information. Thank you, Mr. Spears, for your question. Are there any other questions or concerns? So we're at discussion and possible action regarding the impact fee analysis. I really don't know what the motion should be on this.
The recommendation from staff is to adopt the study at 100%. And then what would happen is, I actually have a couple questions for the commission if that's something you're interested in doing. Is one, in the study there was a discussion about annual adjustments. I'm not sure if that's, I don't believe we've done that currently, but that's something we do for our water and sewer rates, and I'd be interested to know if the commission is interested in that, and we can put that in the ordinance. And then the other issue that I wanted to discuss is the city manager alluded to the timing of it, and how people will be waiting for the rates to change in 90 days. One option, if the commission is interested, is that you only have to give the 90-day warning when the rates increase. If the rates decrease, then they can take effect immediately, and that would be the other issue. And the city manager, I may be speaking out of turn, the city manager may have some other issues that he...
And I wanted to just, if I could, piggyback, as Commissioner Barnes said, on something that Commissioner Friend said earlier, that we could have our hands on some of this material. I appreciate very much the presentation and the information, but I'm a very visual person, and I need some time to look at it more, closely and carefully before I feel completely informed. And I wouldn't mind if we just maybe tabled it until the next meeting, but that's my thoughts. And
as a suggestion, Mayor, if I may, what we could do is we could certainly discuss this at a future commission meeting and perhaps even a workshop, but we could draft an ordinance which absolutely could change based on the feedback from the workshop, and that would certainly afford the commission more time to digest this. This was intended as an informational more than anything to get this out here and present it to you. Frankly, I would have liked to have workshopped this yesterday, but I couldn't get a quorum, and I didn't want to start at 3 o'clock today. So.
Well, and again, I would just like to have all this information in a form that I have it in front of me, and I also would like to keep in mind my colleague, Commissioner Shad, who's not here today and who's very mindful of figures, and he would, I'm sure that, I'm speaking for him, but I think he might like the opportunity to have some time to.
Mayor, if I may, as far as timing goes, to meet the October 1st fiscal year deadline, we would have to adopt it no later than the last meeting of June. So there's a little bit of timing there, but we can certainly do it earlier or whatever y'all prefer. I mean, I can start drafting the ordinance as a city manager discussed, and it can certainly be changed right up until adoption.
So is there a motion and a second from the floor based on the information from the attorney and the city manager? And
Well, I want to restate the motion as to what we're voting on, so I have clear understanding.
Yes.
Well, the staff recommendation is to... There hasn't been a motion
I'm
yet.
saying I can make a motion if you want to hear a motion.
That would probably be better than me making a motion.
I want to know what I'm voting on.
I have no problem. I would make a motion that we go ahead and proceed with drafting of the ordinance with the understanding that we're going to come back together after we've had a chance to digest the data and additional data that's been presented to us. Might even have an opportunity to work it out in a workshop, but we can go ahead and draft the ordinance for a later date. That's my motion.
Is there a second for Commissioner Friend's motion?
I'll second.
So there's been, would you mind repeating your motion one more time for clarity? And
Serious? No. Yeah, I'd make a motion that we go ahead and start drafting of the ordinance with the understanding that we'll get additional data and have time to digest the data that was presented today for a follow-up meeting, which might include a workshop for us to then adopt the ordinance at a later date.
Thank you for repeating that, and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion or questions from the board?
Is there any reason, Mr. Jackson, why we would need to have included in the motion anything about the timeline, or is that just something we need to be mindful of?
No, sir. There's no reason to include that.
Okay.
Okay.
And I can draft the ordinance and get with the city manager about how to present it to you all shortly.
Any questions from the public about what we're doing? Yes, sir.
Don Jackson, 3304 South Harbor Circle. I've got two questions of Burton Associates and then maybe just a statement for consideration as you collect more information. I guess one overriding thing is depending on the goal of the city commission as far as competing for growth within the city as far as job growth. The non-residential side of the whole impact fee study would be opportunities for job growth, be new industry, a new hotel, new office complex, new industrial flex office warehouse space. There's huge changes in the non-residential side of it. But I think what is important to consider and to look at is what are your neighboring cities doing and what are the cities of similar size and type that are doing. Mr. Schubert, in previous presentations, has made a point of comparing the city's future actions and changes compared to, I believe, among other cities, Panama City Beach, Crestview, and Fort Walton, among others, and pretty much use those as comparisons. I think that's very important. I think what's important to know is some of those cities today, they have zero impact fees, okay? They made a corporate municipal decision that they're going to waive all impact fees for the benefit of economic development, and that's a decision they made. So there is a theory that the impact fee can be a detriment to growth, and so it's a balance. So if you have a fee schedule, if you have an industry that wants to come into an area, are they going to choose Lynn Haven? Are they going to choose Panama City? Or are they going to choose Fort Walton? And what they're going to look at is their cost of doing business. Now, whether I build a building as a developer or not and sell them that building to put their call center in or whatever industry they have or hotel, or I lease back that building, I can assure you as a developer, whatever costs that I have, including impact fees, that burden is going to be passed right on to those job creators. Whether in the selling of that building to them, I'm going to recover that cost, or in renting that building to them, I'm going to recover that cost. So I think it's very important in your consideration when you're making your decisions is that you should compare your proposed fee schedule to cities of similar size and type to make that decision. And I just wanted to put that out there. Again, it depends on what the motive is for the city. It'd be interesting to actually see what the budget is today for impact fees. I don't have that number today, but I can tell you I've seen it before. Your budgeted amount for the city to collect in impact fees is very small, actually. And so, it's not small because you don't have high fees. You have very high fees. It's small because you don't have much growth in your city, especially on the commercial side, on the job creator side, because of those impacts. Now, they are changing, and that's going to be helpful, okay, for the commercial developer and for the residential. Two questions I have real quick at Burton Associates, because I believe the question's to them. I'll address it to the mayor.
Mr. Jackson, before you move on, can I just respond to that? I think you're absolutely on point about that comparison, and when you see and everyone for that matter will post this, the detailed comparison that Mr. Burton's talking about, you'll see those bar charts, and you'll see that we fall in line with that now. So, I mean, to that point, I think you just need to look at the detailed comparisons.
Okay. Well, information is very important to make decisions. Question on the non-residential fee structure. What I'm seeing as a developer that still is different in Lynn Haven versus other municipalities is among non-residential or commercial, how some municipalities call it commercial. Within that category, typically in other municipalities, there's a further breakdown into category types. Non-residential, just 4 breakdowns that come to mind, is industrial, office, retail, hotel. I would suggest that a 100,000 square foot warehouse building is going to have substantially less demand on fire and police than a 100,000 square foot hotel or 100,000 square foot office building. Yet, they're still going to be charged the same rate. So again, I don't know if there was a consideration when the study was done that part of a recommendation of the City of Lynn Haven that you adopt a breakdown similar to other municipalities, that within the non-residential category, there's subcategories in there to fit in different types of users. Again, it's about what's fair and reasonable. The guy that wants to stand up a warehouse operation here, a 100,000 square foot building with maybe 4 employees, versus a guy that wants to stand up a 100,000 square foot hotel, the demands on the fire and police are going to be drastically different. So you may lose, again, some opportunity for an Avalorm creator who wants to build a new building here because, again, he's going to go to another area where that breakdown exists. So that's one question I have, and I don't, again, I'm addressing it to the commission, but I don't know if I need...
Would you like to respond to that question, sir?
He's bringing up the issue of what I would call granularity of how far do you break it down, and his point's well taken. You do see in fire assessments, for instance, the breakdown very similar to what he was talking about. You get to the point where do you have north-facing properties less than south-facing properties? You have to decide what makes the difference. Impact fees are benefit-driven. They're not demand-driven. It has to do with the benefit you receive. And for fire and police services, those are really watchstanding services. You get benefit from those services whether you ever have a call for service or not. We sit in our homes, you sit in your businesses, having great comfort that we have the fine police force you have and the fine fire department that you have, and knowing that they can come if we need them at a moment's notice and get there in time to protect our property, protect our life, and we get fire insurance for that, by the way. But we hope they never come. So I know that you have seen calls for service used as allocators in some assessments and things of that nature, but I would argue that the difference isn't nearly as great when you consider the benefit criteria as opposed to the demand. So that's really why we kept it at that level.
Okay, thank you. Yes, one other question.
As it relates to residential, I believe the ERU, it means the equivalent residential unit. For single-family residential, I believe there's no consideration for the size of the home. Is that correct?
Well, for water and sewer impact fees, it's done on an ERU basis, right, and that would be the function of the meter size. For the general government impact fees, we essentially attempted to recreate the existing schedule, and it was our understanding that a single per home fee would be desired for the existing schedule and what the new cost data would apply to that. So it's an apples-to-apples comparison of what you have now versus what the new numbers would calculate on a per-home basis.
I would suggest for desirability for staff, it's certainly easier if there's just one fee schedule for residential, but for residential, single-family residential, again, as somebody that will be building single-family residence here in Lynn Haven very soon, with a product types that's going to range from less than 1,000 square feet to product types that could be upwards of 10,000 square feet, single-family residential, I would again suggest that at the end of the day, as a developer, you're driven by what you can market your property for, and your costs are going to drive that too. If your costs drive you out of competing against another area, we're going to have to compete against some other much larger developments just down the road that currently don't have these types of impact fees. And so again, my question is, was there any consideration to and I know I'm stretching a little bit, but a 10,000 square foot home is going to have a greater demand on the governmental services beyond water and sewer than a 1,000 square foot home. But then if they have the same impact fee, the same charge to the dollar level, when you break it down to a cost per square foot, that 1,000 square foot home, their cost per square foot is going to be substantially higher than that 10,000 square foot home. And so you in some ways price yourself out of some product types that, again, as a developer, we're considering, and I can't speak for other residential developers. So I just wanted to just put that out there as well, and I appreciate
Thank you.
the time.
Thank you for that information.
I just think, and this is just me speaking, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission, I think we need to be very careful in when we start sizing things, because an impact is an impact. I mean, a fire truck has to run, police cars have to be on the streets, garbage trucks have to be on the streets. So we need to be very careful in when we start, this moving things around like that. And I agree with what Mr. Burton was talking about there.
Okay.
If I may, you're looking at a number of different impact fees, and they have different benefit criteria for them. The fire and the police, I think we covered, and I think that on a square foot basis, the larger you are, the more the square footage is a surrogate, if you will, for the value of your structure, and you get more benefit, the more value that's being protected by fire, so on and so forth. On water and sewer, it's calculated on a per square foot basis, and then we relate that to the average square foot for a single family home. That's traditionally been the way those types of things have been done. You will see some out there that have tiers, okay, where they go a home that's 0 to 1,000 square feet, 1,000 to 2, 2 to 3, and above 3, or something like that, and differentiate the fee. If you had an interest in that, we could come up with a schedule that way. I think particularly for the water and sewer side, it may be something that you could do. But then you get into a lot of things that, you have a 3,000 square foot home that's occupied by a retired widow. How much water does she use? And really, in water and sewer, it's been more the meter size. The meter size is the potential demand that a property can place on the system. And usage will change over time. And you don't want to get in a situation where you have, I've seen some systems actually too, where they go in and they test the usage. They say, okay, here's the assumed usage for a single family home. And we'll come back in a year and test what you're using. And if you're using more, you'll have to pay more. And if you're using less, we'll refund it less. Then that's a whole function of who's occupying the home. When the home sells, what's going to happen? Is it a vacation home in a coastal area where they got high usage because they're renting it out, and then a retired couple buys it, and then what do you do? So it would still be my recommendation to consider the equal approach to the single-family resident. But in deference to his point, you could look at some sort of gradation within a single family if you had a desire to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. And this has been a lot of good information this evening, a lot of good questions, and I think we have a very open motion on the floor that we could go forward with, leaving us a lot of leeway to make decisions later, as we're going to be talking about this a lot more. Did you have one other question, sir? I'm sorry about.
Yeah, just one question. We talked a lot about, it hit on several times about do we want to do this for growth, do we want to do that for growth? But I guess that's kind of assumed that everybody wants growth, and if we could just get a quick interjection of each commissioner, city manager, and yourself, if you're actually pro or anti-growth, because not every, it's not assumed, shouldn't be assumed that everybody is, because it's actually, some people aren't, some people are. So is there...
Sure. Well, and again, I think there's going to be a lot of, I don't mind answering your question,
Right.
But I think there's going to be a lot more time for public input, for questions, for input from us, for discussion. We're talking about a workshop. All we're doing tonight is just saying, we need to move forward with this and take it to another discussion. But I don't mind commenting at all. I'm certainly for the growth that's going to benefit the well-being and the quality of life for Lynn Haven residents, whether it be in the area of manufacturing or more soft industry that provides more office-type jobs, whatever will, keep our residents here happy with good incomes, good quality of life. Am I just for building for the sake of building and seeing how big we can get and how many Walmarts and how many this we can put up on Highway 77? Absolutely not. But for the beautiful, community that we're trying to build, I think that growth, managed growth and carefully thought out growth and what's going to benefit our citizens is a good thing. That's my opinion. So if that's what you wanted.
Yeah, it
Well,
is.
and I'll be more than happy to answer that question as well. Being part of the growth that has taken, when I was elected to this commission in 1996, there was basically nothing here. In 1998, we basically adopted the philosophy of growth should pay for itself, and not necessarily let every Tom, Dick, and Harry come in and bring everything they want to. But if people are going to come in and they're bringing good, clean jobs to this area and they're making an impact on the system, then yes, growth should pay for itself. As you can see from the growth that Lynn Haven has taken over the past several years, we're one of the fastest growing cities in Northwest Florida. So obviously we're for growth. Speaking for me, and at the time the other commissioners as well, is that I believe that the growth should pay for itself. And if we have new growth come in, then the other people, other citizens in this community should not be impacted by that growth that's taking place. If they're coming in, then again, like I said, that growth needs to pay for itself when it comes into this community.
Anybody else on the board want to comment on that, or we move along?
I don't mind commenting. I think you said it best, Mayor. It's managed growth. I mean, that's where I'm at. So, okay. I mean, I'm not going to go on and on.
Yep.
But I might use the opportunity to say,
go ahead.
just to put that out there. It is no disrespect to our developer, but I don't see competition as real. I completely understand your position as a developer, but I think Lynn Haven stands above and beyond the other areas for growth, and I think that's why we have to manage growth. And I think part of that can't be overlooked, that it's because a couple of the people that are in the room tonight, in this corner and that corner, we're one of the safest cities. We're listed as one of the safest cities in our ISO ratings, our schools, our parks, and everything else that goes around with it. I would argue that some of the other cities might not have impact fees because they're trying to invite growth or invite developers to their area, where I think we're trying to manage the growth. And I agree with Commissioner Barnes that with the new growth, it needs to be paid with the new fees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, unless there's any other comment or questions, we'll proceed with the motion. Okay. City Manager Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. And we are moving on to item number 19. This is Resolution 2016-04-645. And once again, thank you for bringing that presentation to us this evening. I'm sorry I didn't thank you again. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. So Resolution 2016-04-645, amending the adopted General Fund, Community Redevelopment Agency, and Main Street budgets and the approved Enterprise Fund budgets for fiscal year 2015-2016. Would you please read the resolution?
Resolution number 2016-04-645, a resolution of the City of Lynn Haven, Florida, amending the adopted General Fund, Community Redevelopment Agency, and Main Street budgets and the approved Enterprise Fund budget for fiscal year 2015-2016. Thank
you. And before I ask for a motion, I wanted to just make a comment myself about the adopted general fund. I have not had, I don't know when, I received my copy of this yesterday, and I really would like to have some more time to look at it, to be able to ask questions. And so I'm requesting that someone might make a motion that we could table this until the next commission meeting. I've been told that it would not, that we're not on a timeline, that it has to be done today. And also, and this is just, I just need careful time to reflect and to look at these numbers, and having it from yesterday to today, it has not given me that opportunity. I just need more time. I'm requesting that. And then I would also like to ask, for the benefit of Commissioner Shad, who's not here today through no fault of his own. He's in an emergency, and he's a stickler for looking at the numbers, and I'd like to give him an opportunity to have input as well. So that's my comment.
Mayor, I think didn't we get this over the weekend? Friday we got it, so I think.
I didn't have it in my box Friday. I had the commission. I picked up my board book on Friday, but I did not have the budget in my box, and it was in the box yesterday because I picked it up, and I just would like to have some more time. If you all choose not for me to have more time, then I'll vote the best that I can with the information that I've been able to discern. So
I'll move approval for this resolution.
Is there a second?
I will second just to call the question, but I have no problem with holding off for another meeting.
Are we under time constraint? Is my understanding that we?
That's what I
this
just
has
said
to-
at the beginning.
No,
I had asked the
we just
attorney,
sitting.
and he said, no, we were not.
So this can be taken up, as I understand it, at our first meeting in, what month is this? May?
That's my understanding, Commissioner Ashbrook.
My understanding is, and I just learned this today, this is something we've traditionally done, and I think everyone knows where I stand with that, but we're not even required to do a mid-year amended budget. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't
sure.
mean to interrupt you. I think it's a great thing to do. And I also will be the first to admit that I'm a brand new mayor. This past week was 1 year that I've been in office. When I receive a document that's this thick and its numbers on something as important as the city budget, I would just like to have a little more time to look at it before I make a decision. So I appreciate any consideration from the board, and I understand if you can't. I appreciate, Commissioner Ashbrook, you're saying that it would be okay with you.
Just to finish, I was just going to say that, I do.
Sorry.
I think it's a good idea to check in. I'd also just like to, we produce a monthly report of expenditures as well. And I have no problem with deferring this. Certainly I can speak to it tonight and or at another meeting where the difference is. And I like to check in. I will say, just since we're talking about it, I will just say three quick things. One, this mid-year amended budget, there's no transfer from general to enterprise fund or vice versa. So we have two independent funds. We continue to maintain a minimum of 6 months of reserve, so that's good. And while we're doing better than anticipated at our first meeting, I'll tell you that these numbers, because the check hasn't been recorded yet, do not reflect the $600 and something thousand from the recent land sale as well. So I'm encouraged of where we're at. I've got, I
Thank you.
can certainly explain in detail at a later meeting as well.
And I would love to have the opportunity in the coming days to, to meet with you and to be able to go over it and to ask questions. I would just like that opportunity. So anyway, is there a motion, or we've had a motion that we go ahead with it tonight, and then I didn't really understand your second, Commissioner Ashbrook.
Well, I thought the only way we could have a discussion about it would be to second the motion. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Mr.
Thank you.
Jackson?
So-
We've had a discussion about it. Otherwise, it would die for lack of a second. So I seconded the motion so we could have our discussion.
Thank you. So now where do I go?
There's a motion and a second, and the motion is to approve the recommendation of staff.
Okay, so is there any comment from the public, questions?
So as I understand it, if we vote no, we're not approving the amendment. Or is that correct? We are.
If you vote no, you would not approve the amendment tonight.
But we could have a second motion to.
But you could have a second motion to consider it at a later date.
A city attorney Commissioner Barnes, at his pleasure, could also
Withdraw his motion or
write or restate it.
For the sake of argument, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. So is there a motion?
Commissioner Ashbrook would have to
I
withdraw
will
his
make a
second.
motion that we adopt the resolution at the first meeting in May. Thank you. At our next scheduled meeting, that we bring this up for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the public or the board? Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. And so we will be looking at this at the first meeting in May, and I sincerely express my gratitude to all of you for that leeway. Thank you. Item number 20, Resolution 2016-04-646, Highway 390 Commercial Incentive Program. Mr. Schubert, would you please read Resolution 2016?
Resolution number 2016-04-646, a resolution of the City of Lynn Haven, Florida, approving the city's Highway 390 Commercial Incentive Program, encouraging dislocated commercial businesses to relocate to the city, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Is there a motion for acceptance of Resolution 2016-04-646?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any question or discussion of this? Any question or discussion from the public? There is none. Mr. Schubert, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ashbrook?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. So the resolution for the Highway 390 Commercial Incentive Program is approved. And now we move to our final item this evening, which is public commentary. And this is a time when any member of the public may comment on any item of concern. And Mr. DeFell, I did cut you off earlier when you were commending the police. Would you like to continue with that? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anyone else who has an item they'd like to bring out tonight?
Jeff Spears, 404 Kentucky Avenue.
Thank you.
Glad to put some faces with some names. Basically, I was granted an extension and basically coming in to meet and talk today. I'm the owner of the home at 404 Kentucky Avenue, the one that incurred a fire for it. A little over 2 years ago. Basically doing a lot of back and forth with code enforcement. Trying to kind of build on something, so if you have any questions, just stop me. But basically, I've gotten to a certain point of progress, and basically some recent events have occurred in the last few weeks, and that's why I'm here now, is to kind of establish what needs to be done from there, what I can and cannot do from there, and the reasons why. The gist of the story is in the last 3 weeks or so, plus or minus a few days, I've been in direct communication with code enforcement. I've complied with everything that he has said, and then for some reason there's been some clash in terms and clash in things that have occurred versus things that I was told that I can do and not do, and those points is make sure the grass is cut, move some vehicles, go down to the building department, start the application process for building a home and doing repairs to a standalone garage, and cleaning up a little bit more refuge that was left over from the prior occurrences with code. If you need me to build a complete timeline, I can. So basically...
I'm personally aware of the timeline and the situation. Right. The rest of the commission may or may not be.
Right. So approximately... I want to say 20 days ago, 18 to 20 days ago, I was contacted by Mike Brown, the code enforcement gentleman. Said, hey, where are we at? What's going on with the house and the demolition and the cleanup? I said, it's 95% done. I just had some really problematic things. My dad came down with bladder cancer over many, many weeks of time. He eventually, in another state, me constantly going back, and he passed away. And then as time permitted me to get by, I took care of things, handled things, and did what I could. And then he rang my phone and says, hey, where are we at? The timeline crunch, you got some extensions, and so on and so forth. And I said, okay, what needs to happen? Where do I need to go from here to get things done? He said, you got to finish up the last things. You got to get a building permit. You got to get the building permit. You got to apply for the building permit for the house and the garage. I said, okay, no problem. That day, I went down to the building department, picked up the packet. Within 48 hours, I filled out completely the packet with every bit of detail that I could possibly do as a homeowner, and recorded it all down, recorded it at the courthouse like I was supposed to, and then within 48 hours, turned it back into Miss Gloria of the building department. Approximately a week goes by. Didn't hear anything, got back up with Miss Gloria, said, hey, I hadn't got a call. She said, well, you just got to wait it out, maybe backed up or whatever, just wait it out. Another 7 days, which would be another Friday. I turned the packet on Friday, called her on a Friday, and then another Friday goes by, and I get a certified letter in the mail when I get home from work stating that I didn't do what I was supposed to do, I didn't comply with anything, that this Tuesday, basically they're proceeding forward and they're going to demolition the garage that needed a final wall to be put up. It's an existing garage that needs a wall put up, that we're just going to go through and demolition everything and then charge you for it, and that's just the way it is. And So I got that letter, and basically I got that letter, and I was given less than 1 business day to basically recover any assets that I have at the property, to even just get out of the way from the demo from happening altogether. Monday morning, I get a phone call from a Mike McQuaig, who works for some company called, I think it's called EPCI or EPCI, something like that. It says, hey, Mr. Spears, I got your plans. I'm reviewing them. I see a problem with your wall that you want to do for the garage. Basically something about the footer needs to be 2 more inches wider. Everything else looks fine, and you need to redraw the drawing to scale. And I said, okay, that sounds good. But I said, I got all these other issues. I said, but he said, I just need to get up with the mayor and the city manager, so on and so forth, and discuss with them, because he's discusses building plans and stuff. So, and then I asked him, I said, well, you're a private company. What's the deal with that? He says, well, Lynn Haven decided to get rid of their building department. They don't even have a building department. So in actuality, Gloria, I don't know if you call her working at the building department or not, because I guess she's like a clerical paper pass along person, because there's no building department in Lynn Haven. Is that correct? That doesn't exist.
We have a public-private partnership with EPCI, like every other city in this county does.
Right. Yeah, that's what he explained to me, is that they have the contract for almost every city and municipality. So, so he tells me those things that I need to do to make the plans valid, and then he tells me about, and then I started questioning, well, when did you get these plans? And he says, well, I just got them Friday. And I said, okay. I said, they've been down there for 2 weeks. Is that your normal, you just now getting them? They mail them to you or whatever? He said, no, I'm by 2 to 3 times a week to pick up plans to take care of. So I said, well, that really doesn't explain how I submitted something on a Friday, and it took 2 more Fridays for it to even get in your hand. And then I find out later on through a long recourse of email that I got just minutes later after, just long enough basically for Mike Brown to compose the email, minutes later after I got off the phone with Mike McQuaig, that basically here are all the reasons why, and one of those reasons was I didn't submit for the building of a home, was one of the reasons that I was denied. And I was denied the modification of the existing garage to bring that up to building code. I don't understand how all that could have transpired the way it did. I don't understand how if he picks up 2 to 3 times a week, that's at least 5 to 6 opportunities that he could have picked it up and never got picked up until the day that I received the letter. And why is it that, so.
Well, I appreciate your bringing the concern before the commission, and so what I would like to do is to defer the answer to the city manager, who is the administrator for the city employees. He is the person who works with them on a day-to-day basis and has the timeline and the information, and that way if he could just respond, and then the commission can hear his response and maybe get a better picture.
Are you done, Mr. Spears? I don't want to.
I'm sure there'll be more once we discuss.
Okay. Well, listen, I'll tell you right up front, as I wrote to you in an email, my condolences, and I'm sorry you're going through this. I do have a detailed timeline, and I'll just hit the highlights. I'd just like to, I think one thing you and I are always going to agree on is, there's one set of facts. And these are the ones that I have. I was personally involved with this at least the last 2 years. But just for a frame of reference, I know most of what you're talking about has been the last couple months, but the house burned down, according to our records, April 28, 2013, which will be 3 years this Thursday. On June 11, 2013 is the first time, and I wasn't here, but we've got a file with it. June 11, 2013, about a month and a half later, was the first time you were cited by code enforcement. No other action was taken for over 2 years. It wasn't in that June 11th they cited you. June 9th, 2015, we sent a letter to you, a notice order of nuisance abatement to demolish the house because, according to Officer Brown, he knew that you're, having a difficult time as far as the reasons that he was getting from you was you got to do an insurance claim. So we gave you over 2 years, or the city gave you over 2 years between the first time you were cited. Doesn't pick back up till August 8, 2015, after that notice of order of nuisance abatement to demolish the house and remove a semi-trailer and other debris. Gives you 30 days to appeal. The 30 days elapsed August 8, 2015, and the city took bids to demolish the house. And I was here for that, and we had another house on Tennessee Avenue, and we took bids hoping that we could get a better bid with two houses, so it would be a quantity type deal. That house did eventually get demolished in September or the first week of October. You and I spoke September 9th, 2015 after that, after it wasn't appealed, and I granted you an additional 60 days to complete the abatement, mainly because in one of my mantras that I preach to the staff, and I think we do a good job, is we're going to treat you like the one before you and the one that comes after you. But what happened, full admission, is the contractor, one of the contractors we hired, entered your residence prematurely before we awarded him the bid. Shouldn't have done that. We had LHPD come out there at your request, our request, and go out there and do the investigation. I wanted you to have at least 60 extra days. So you and I spoke. You had some other reasons, but I certainly thought the fact that we had a contractor not perform the way we wanted him to, and he hasn't performed any services since, I certainly thought a 60-day extension was warranted. November 8th, 2016, the 60 days, that would be 60 days after September 9th, that extension elapsed without you demolishing the structure again, and the trailer was still there. Again, the city prepared the abatement, owner got the demolition, you got the demolition permit and began demo, which you did. January 20th, 2016, had not completed the demolition, leaving the garage section of the house standing, but not in a safe and closed condition. Everything else was still there for the most part, semi, etc. Late January 2016, this year, Officer Brown spoke to you in regard to the unfinished demolition. The owner stated they were going to build a house facing 4th Street, as you mentioned, and was going to enclose the garage or include the garage in that design. Officer Brown, according to his records, Officer Brown informed you the unfinished demolition and abatement continued to be a problem and it must be completed or the city would complete the abatement or the demolition, and the only way the garage could remain would be as part of a house. On a residential structure or a residential lot, you can't just have an accessory structure, which the garage would be considered, so you'd have to have the house. And he also stated the only thing that might avoid the end would be to get a building permit for the house, which included the existing garage, incorporated that into your new house. To this date, as far as I've seen, and I checked with Gloria today, and I reviewed your application, I have not seen an application with a house. It was just for the garage, detailed footings, etc. for the garage. So on April 12th, you did submit a renovation plan for the garage with no plans for a house, and I will have to check with Mike McQuaig. He's the only, and he's not staff. I have not checked with the contractor when and what he said when he contacted you, but per Mike Brown, the permit was turned down by the building department since the owner was only requesting the accessory structure and it didn't reflect a single-family residence. April 16, 2016, after waiting, and you said, several weeks, Officer Brown requested abatement bids from the contractors and sent the owner the current notice of entry for April 26, 2016 at 7 a.m., which would have been this morning. Yesterday, you did contact, again, I know you've had ongoing meeting with code enforcement. I think you and I exchanged an email, and you'd also talked to a member of the commission, and you stated you weren't being treated less than admirably, I believe, and wanted to speak at the commission meeting tonight. So because of all this, because of the long history, the 3 years, I told that contractor who had equipment parked next to your residence this morning, hold off, again at the cost of Lynn Haven taxpayers, to mobilize out there because I wanted the commission to hear the whole story. My only issue is this, one of the things as city manager I take as seriously, if not the most seriously, is being a fiscally responsible, because this isn't my money. It's your money. It's everybody else that pays taxes in Lynn Haven, and there's nothing I take more seriously. And we've already spent an inordinate amount of money over these past 3 years when you look at the soft costs and the hard costs, And I guess what I'm saying to you is you and I had a conversation 7 or 8 months ago, and you said you'd have it done in 60 days. I never heard back from you. I'm not afforded the luxury of visiting every house, but I do rely on staff, and most of the time it's very rewarding to rely on my staff because they do an excellent job. But it's been 3 years. It's been 5 months since I gave you the 60 days. I don't want to spend any more of the city of Lynn Haven's finite resources trying to enforce this. So, I mean, if you've got a better solution, I'd like to hear it, but I think 3 years is a pretty long time.
Right, it is. 3 years is a very long time, as you said. But a lot of that built into that 3 years was a timeline that I did not know that existed based upon the second something burns down. I don't know that I'm issued a timeline from that point on. So when you reflect that part, that's not a given timeline that is exposed to me. And actually, if you check with Mike Brown, which this is yet to be brought up, for some anomaly I yet to explain, about a 6 to 9 month period with inside of that, after you guys started getting involved in the code, he was doing direct communication with my ex-wife that had no involvement with that property in over 4 years, and he was doing communication with her in regards to her buying the house, her using the house, her maybe buying it from me and redoing it and bringing it up to code and rebuilding it and all this other stuff. And then he had disclosed that to me, but that's something that I hadn't rehashed because I thought things would be resolved. So there's no explanation whatsoever. When we divorced over probably 5 years now, I became sole owner of the property, so why he was having an extensive conversation, discussion, and making communication with her at all about that property is unbeknownst to me. So.
Sure, and I could check with him on that. Perhaps she didn't let him know that. Perhaps it wasn't reflected in public records. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe he wasn't getting communication back from you. But I can tell you this, as far as this timeline, this is an anomaly, as you were saying. I don't usually keep a timeline. As far as, the timeline, and I think it's very well spelled out here, is, starting a month and a half later, you had 30 days to produce a plan or remediate this. And then we gave you over 2 years after that to do it. And then we gave you 2 or 3 more times. And this timeline isn't reflective of the process of you remediating that property. It's reflective of everything that we tried to do to enforce our code. And again, I'm not trying to come down on you, but I can tell you this. The other house that was demolished in September, I have witnessed firsthand the burden it puts on neighbors. And I'm not sure if yours is as bad as the other one I looked at a few months ago, but there's vermin, there's kids that can't play in a pool next door because there's literally rats running around. It's infested.
Well, I'll go ahead and let you know that the exact opposite actually was of mine, because the lady who came out to do the asbestos abatement certification made it known that she was really surprised at how clean. There was no rodents, there was no rat droppings, there was no roach droppings. I mean, that's here nor there, but that was directly, specifically said by her.
Mr. Spears, if I could, at this point, just intervene, and I think the city manager has laid out a pretty good, timeline of events, and I guess the question that I would have is, did you present a house plan to the building department, or was it just for an accessory structure?
I supplied a application for building permit that included both a modification to bring up the code, the standalone garage, and for a home. It says, actually right on it says, bringing up the code, the garage, and a house. It says it right on the paperwork.
Because
now it does not. We did not have a plan built, a plan supplied yet, because the lady, Miss Gloria, said, well, you're going to need to talk to the building department about drainage, easements, and a lot of other things. So that plan couldn't be drawn up and put forth yet, just because of so many different variables that someone was going to contact me, which just only happened this Monday.
Well, I'll let the other, the other commissioners may have comments or may not. I'll defer, but I personally, I feel like that the city manager has done due diligence and following through, and I certainly concur with, with sympathy that there was a fire and there was this or there was that. But as mayor, my responsibility is to look for the well-being and the quality of life for everybody in Lynn Haven. And I did drive by and personally look at the property several times, and there have been complaint after complaint after complaint from the people living, around the area. And for whatever reason, the proper actions have not been taken on a timely. I know recently that those were beyond your control, but before that. So that's just my thoughts. And it's a difficult, decision for the code enforcement and but that's what the ordinances are for. They're for the quality of life and the fair treatment of all citizens of Lynn Haven. So that's my comment, and I would defer if any of the other commissioners have a comment that they would, want to make or a question they might want to ask. So I think that we've reached a point of, I think that it would be legal action on your part or something.
Well, we didn't actually come to an answer as to why my discussion with Mike Brown gave me these guidelines. I complied with those guidelines like 3 weeks ago, and I complied with those guidelines, and then he was actually, before even 48, 72 hours, even went by before, somewhere in the timeline, me actually turning in the application, just turning it in.
And I don't personally
He was already
know
putting
the
out
answer.
bids. How are you putting out bids before it even gets into the hands of...
So can I ask a question? I mean, even before you got to this point, what about the other 2 years and the extensions that were provided to you in order to get everything in order to comply with the ordinance?
Could you narrow that down a little bit more specific? Or, well, because the 2 years the house burnt, I had almost 2 years dealings with just the insurance company, going through all the hoops of doing what they needed to do. If there's not a check, you don't get much done. So that ate up a huge amount of time all by itself. But mainly the reason I came to speak was for the 3-week window of time. That's what I came most prepared for, and that was the fact that I was contacted by him. I've always been in direct communication with code. I've never not returned an email. I've never not answered a phone call. If I missed a phone call, I would return the phone call. And it's in regards to the January 20-ish something phone call. He says, I have recollection of everything else, but I don't have any recollection of that. I certainly didn't receive a letter that I know of stating anything as such. So basically, he was kind of absent from it. I was performing what I needed to get done, and then I was recontacted by him. At latest, it was approximately 3 weeks ago.
And not trying to pass the buck, as the statement is, but that's my day-to-day purview is not to follow the job of Mike Brown or the other city employees. That would be the city manager. And so for you to be able to see, I haven't seen those documents. You can certainly make a public records request if and you can meet with the city manager and see what transpired. But at this point, what I'm looking at is the fact that there have been several years here of nothing happening, and that's affecting the quality of life of those around you. So that's my position.
I have one question. When did you settle with the insurance company?
I don't remember the exact date. I'd have to say somewhere around 13 to 15 months ago.
So you've had that money all this time and not done anything with it?
No, I've put that aside per the guidelines of what I needed to meet.
Okay. I think that the purpose, this is public commentary. It's an opportunity for you to present your thoughts and your case before the commission. And I'm certainly not a judge and jury here. All I can do is hear what you're saying and give you a chance for a public, commentary, because the commission, we can't meet together without being here.
Right.
Sorry you had to do this publicly.
Yeah.
But if you choose to follow this further, I'm not encouraging you to sue the city by any means, but you would have to get legal counsel, I think, if you're going to go further because I think that the city manager has reached where he's going to be.
So there's really not an answer that can be provided in regards to the correspondence. So
that would incur on your part a public records request, which you can certainly do and have by tomorrow. If you do that, and then you would go from there.
I can tell you this. My position is we'd have been justified to order that abatement and get the bids 60 days after our original agreement, and it's been 5 months since that 60 days lapsed. So, to me, discussing the last month or two is not really relevant. I'd like to see you be successful. I don't know what you're here asking. If we want to discuss and debate the last 2 months, to me, it's not even relevant. I'd like to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34.
Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the prior 34. Well, basically, what I'm here for is to discuss the pri if I'm given by a city employee a directive and a set of instructions, and I'm doing those instructions, but yet while doing those instructions, there's ulterior motives happening and never any actions of doing.
I would disagree on the ulterior motives, and I would disagree that the directives, I think, were pretty succinct over the prior 34 months, and at least the prior 22 months that I've been here. I've been here 24 months. I don't keep a file like this. I've got, one just as thick with all the emails. This is the only case I have a file like this. I don't normally keep a timeline. I've spent an inordinate amount of time on this myself. So, I mean, if you've got a solution where you can have that thing knocked down tomorrow, frankly, I don't understand why, it might be cheaper just to use the guy we've got out there waiting.
And Mr. Spears, I would just say that I think we've reached, the end of the conversation as far as the commission meeting goes. I mean, there's really no further that I can go with the commission meeting. You would have the avenues of pursuing it further personally if you choose to do that. But I don't have any further avenues for you this evening based on the evidence that the city manager has. And then just one more time to reiterate, I'm not disputing what you're saying, that you feel like the last 2 weeks something has occurred, but at the same time, I can't overlook the fact of what the city manager has brought forth about this, almost 3 years of information before. So you're certainly free to pursue a public records request to prove what you're, to show the evidence of what you've said tonight to someone else. But I think we've reached. I don't see the benefit in going over this again tonight. Is what I'm trying to say.
Something that you had said earlier that the building permit was denied. What was the basis of it, and when did that occur?
It occurred within the last 2 to 3 weeks. I can talk to EPCI and get you a date. It was denied on the fact that it was an accessory structure that was submitted and not a residence with a garage attached. And I reviewed it too. I'm not a plans examiner by trade, but I did not see any square footage of a home. I did not see a plan. I did not see an elevation. All I saw were details of the garage and what was going to happen to the garage. Now, certainly if you might have put single-family home there, but it would lack almost everything needed for a plans examiner to review that and sign off on a single-family residence.
Well, that was because that would be me getting the cart ahead of the horse. If I'm just throwing out plans and spending money on plan designs and then it just all gets squashed and go backwards, versus I'm not building a garage. It's an existing garage that needs to be brought up to code to put a wall up.
And so, Mr. Spears, at this point, I hope you don't think that I'm being rude to you or I'm cutting you off. I think you've presented your case before the commission. I think they've all heard, what you have to say. I think the city manager has presented the documentation. And so I think that your next step in dealing with this is if you feel that you need to go further with it, I think you're going to probably have to secure some legal counsel and maybe make an appointment, pull some public records.
Well, additionally,
because
what he said
there's nothing else that I can do tonight.
Right. Well, I'm going to speak directly to Mr. Schubert.
And if you could bring it to,
okay.
This would be a close. Thank you.
You notated that you needed to get up with Mr. Mike McQuaig. Is that still of any value for you doing that? Is there anything pertinent to that other than
I would stand with my statement that I think the prior 34 months before what happened, and I would, just because I'm a detail-oriented person, I'd like to know everything, and I will, I'll question it, but as far as adding value, I think the prior 34 months stand on their own.
Well, that would shed some light on the fact that you said that it was denied 2 to 3 weeks ago. I submitted it. This Friday would make 3 weeks when I submitted it, but yet he's calling me, giving me advice, telling me what I can and do, what I can't do. That's just, would it be agreed that that's an anomaly? That's very unusual. That why would somebody call me on a denied application? That just. And
so once again, I appreciate you coming, and at this point, I think that that's all that I can do tonight. Is you've had the opportunity. The commission is well aware now of the timeline. They're well aware of your dispute. Your facts don't seem to line up with what Mr. McQuaig or Mr. Brown said. So you need to, if you want to take it further, you would need to maybe secure counsel or maybe get the public records and maybe then make an appointment that your counsel and yourself could discuss it further, because I believe that the city manager has documented it very carefully, and it's definitely outside what the ordinances of the city of Lynn Haven will allow. So that's
okay. Well,
and so at this time, I would thank you for coming, and that's really.
Well, I want to concede to all that, but what I want to do is I want I want to see his 24 tomorrow offer that you said knock it down tomorrow. If I knocked it down tomorrow, I was asking basically if I could have that offer double to 48 hours, me knock it down and clear it out myself in 48 hours instead of 24.
That's ominous.
So in 48 hours.
I was talking hypothetically. I mean, if you want to meet offline, we can meet offline. I just want to see that property abated.
So at this time, if I could, I'm going to ask you to, this is the end, and if you'd like to contact Mr. Schubert, if he's willing to discuss that with you, and I do appreciate you coming tonight and bringing everything. Thank you. Is there anyone else that has an issue to bring before the commission tonight? This meeting is adjourned.